Now, I wanted to talk, as I mentioned, a little bit about authority and truth. If authority and issues of authority are thorny when it comes to science, it gets even worse when it comes to ethics, morality, all that kind of stuff. So, with authority and truth, I wanted to just look at the one of the common views of authority and truth. One of the common views of its link is often between religion and ethics. And what are the foundations of ethics? Well, some people think it's grounded in some kind of authority, and one way to think of this is has come down through the tradition, and we're going to see this again in when we read Plato's Euthyphro, in what is sometimes referred to as a divine command theory, and this is a clear example of authority grounding truth. And so let's think about this. Think about ethics, like what's wrong, what's right. So a preliminary sort of notion. Yeah, what's wrong, what's right. Where does that come from, right? What's the source of rightness and wrongness? Where do we get that from when you say something's right, something wrong? Well, in a strict link between authority and the truth of moral propositions goes something like this. This is referred to as the divine command theory. Again, we'll see this again in Plato in a little while, but it's good to have a look at it right now. So what is right? What is moral, good, right? Or what is wrong or evil or bad? Basically what God says, right? So God says like a commandment, right? That's a very clear notion of a link between authority and truth. These are true propositions, the commandments. What's the ground of their truth? Why? Because God says. Okay, so there is an authority there that is, shall we say, the foundation of the truth of those propositions that we call commandments. They are commands. Now, let's think a little bit about this. If it's grounded in what God says, well, you're really thinking that it's grounded in the notion of the will of God, right? If it's grounded in a will, right? Some mysterious thing we call the will of God, but we know we can relate it to our own sense of will. When we decide something or decide for or against. But think about it. If what is right is what God says, and that's really according to His will, could God say tomorrow that murder is okay and being nice to people and charity is wrong? In other words, just flip these things or arbitrarily change them in the sense of a whole bunch of things that those will still say bad, but a few of those bad things will now be good, and I'll transfer something from the good column to the bad column in sort of a haphazard way. And that would be the end of the story, right? So on the divine command model, if you really take the argument from authority and linking, shall we say, linking authority and truth, that's what you end up with. So tomorrow, right, God could say, maybe He won't, but He could, in principle, say that something like, murder is just fine. So in that sense, be aware of how these things may sound very abstract, but they do crop up in other areas. So arguments from authority often crop up in ethics, right? And I want to look a little bit further at a very common argument from authority in ethics that we'll deal with it in various places in this course, because even culture models of ethics are kind of arguments from authority, right? So the grounding of what is right or wrong isn't in the will of God. It might be in like the dictates or the mores or the maxims or the ideas of a community. That too is another kind of argument from authority, because that sets the norms or the standards. So let's think a little bit, because arguments from authority are found in scripture-based arguments. Let's think a little bit more about scripture-based arguments, and so we can tease out a few of the other things that are going on behind these arguments from authority. And remember, they are fallacies, but it doesn't always mean they're terrible or wrong.